everyone, Morgan here. So it's time to talk about Album of the Week again. And last week we had a conversation with my buddy Steve about King Crimson's Discipline. And we spent a great deal of time talking about their drummer, Bill Bruford. Now, before Bruford joined King Crimson, he was in a band called Yes. And we featured Yes last year in an album called Fragile and talked about it in great detail. So what we're going to look at this week is the follow-up album to Fragile, which is Close to the Edge. And it was the last Yes album that Bill Bruford played on. He became quite a bit frustrated with the band during the recording of this album and left without much notice as soon as the album was done. So they had to find a new drummer for the tour, and the tour was starting within a week. So Chris Squire, the bass player, reached out to an old friend of his named Alan White, who had been John Lennon's drummer for the Plastic Ono Band sessions back in 1970. And he joined the band, learned the entire repertoire in 3 days, and then they did a show, I think, in Dallas. And that was quite an experience. And that tour was well documented with a film called Yes Songs, which is a really great live album and film if you can find it on YouTube. So Close to the Edge, the band had incredible success with Fragile. They really did well, and the tour was well received, and they got lots of airplay. And they could have probably retired at that point and been known as one of the best bands of all time. But they decided to go in and get incredibly democratic in the studio, and at the same time, two of the members, John Anderson and Steve Howe, became very much the leaders, and they came in and they knew what direction it was going to go in, and then they'd have these endless democratic discussions about, well, what instrument's going to play this and what instrument's going to play that, and that is something that frustrated Bruford, and he wanted to get over. He wanted to be a little more experimental. That definitely why he ended up with King Crimson, and some jazz stuff, which is why he had a side band called Earthworks. Now, the album took a different approach. Instead of each member contributing one song, which they played entirely themselves, like they did on Fragile, and then having a few group recordings, there are only 3 songs on this album. Side 1 was just one song called Close to the Edge. In the original recording, it goes about 18 and a half minutes, and when played live, it would end up more about 21, 22 minutes. An amazing piece, complex beyond belief, time signature changes, tempo changes, key changes, just really out there different progressive rock, and really well received by Yes's fans, not so much by the critics. Side 2 only had 2 tracks on it, and You and I, and then a track called Siberian Khatru. Now, and You and I had about 3 different sections to it. It got considerable airplay because they edited it down to like 2 songs, so an A and a B side for a single release. Siberian Khatru was a much more upbeat piece, and was basically their show opener for decades. They'd always begin with that track. Now, with time, this really became well received by the critics, but not when it was released. It was certified platinum by the 1990s, and then got a nice reworking into 5.1 mix in maybe about 2013. It is really a treat to listen to through headphones, and it's an even bigger treat to hear them perform it live. And I've heard it live from them. I've seen Yes more than I've seen any other band perform live, and lots of their different lineup changes. I've heard them play it, and for the 1989 tour, which was officially called an Anderson, Buford, Wakeman, Howe tour, without Yes being involved, Chris Squire wasn't there. They nailed it, and it had been a while since they had played it, probably 10 years in its entirety on stage. and we were out at the Greek Theater up there in Griffith Park, and they opened the second set of the show after an intermission with that track, and it floored the audience. I was actually sitting front row center for that. Some radio station tickets that I got. And when that was done, the whole place was on their feet, just mesmerized, cheering, standing ovation for just how good it still sounded. And that was 1989 for an album that had come out in 1972. Okay? So it's worth your time to sit and listen to this. It really is. It's different. There are some of you that would love it and some of you that would hate it. But it is definitely one of the pinnacles of progressive rock, but a very different progressive rock than what King Crimson would play. Everything on the album was done by 5 guys, all in the studio. They're not using things like sequencers, okay? It's these tracks were played live. They made those sounds with the keyboards and the bass, and it took a lot of effort to get it right, but it was worth it. It's really an amazing piece. Now, not that you'd probably be able to do this, but if you ever can locate a vinyl copy of it, this was the first album where they used Roger Dean as the artist for the cover, and he introduced their very classic Yes logo. And it's an amazing, plain, but amazing cover, with a gatefold that would open up with a big drawing on the inside, and it started a very long relationship between the band and Roger Dean, and some really spacey, amazing artwork. Okay, so hope you enjoy that one. This is Morgan signing off.